A woman haunted by her family's past always wears a knife she has never drawn. When 7 gunmen ride in demanding her blood, she is forced to use it, unleashing a secret that was never about revenge, but about a fortune buried in lies. Teaming up with her sworn enemies, she must expose the sinister mastermind who manipulated their families into a deadly feud. A story of betrayal, redemption, and the one knife that could cut through the past. Subscribe and like for more epic western tales. The wind on the high prairie was a constant companion, whispering through the tall grass that stretched to the edge of the world. For Alara, it was the only voice she needed. Her homestead was a solitary island in a sea of green and gold, a place of hard-won peace built with her own 2 hands. She was a woman known for her quiet strength, for the bounty of her garden, and for the knife she always wore on her belt. It was a beautiful thing, its bone handle carved with intricate, swirling patterns, its blade forged from the finest steel. But it was a symbol, not a tool. She used it for chow vegetables, for cutting twine, for the peaceful chores of a solitary life. The neighbors in the distant town of Bitterroot called her the Willow for her grace and resilience, but they whispered about the knife. They wondered about the past she never spoke of. That past rode in on the evening wind. 7 men. They emerged from the dipping sun like demons, their silhouettes black and sharp against the orange sky. They moved with a predatory grace, their horses lathered from hard riding. They did not slow as they approached her fence. They simply rode through it, splintering the wood as if it were kindling. Their leader, a man with a face like weathered leather and eyes as cold as a winter creek, reined in his horse just feet from her porch. The others fanned out behind him, a half-circle of impending violence. Alara did not move. She stood perfectly still, her hand resting not on the knife, but on the porch post, as if steadying herself against the hatred that radiated from them. The leader's voice was a dry rasp, like stones grinding together. "Alara Kane," he said. It wasn't a question. He knew. "Or do you go by another name now? Hiding out here, pretending to be something you're not." Alara's heart was a frantic drum against her ribs, but her voice was eerily calm. "I go by my name. This is my land. You're trespassing." A cruel smile twisted the man's lips. "We're not here about land, girl. We're here about blood. Kane blood, your blood." He spat onto the ground between them. "My name is Cyrus Blackwood. Silas Blackwood was my brother. You remember Silas, don't you? Your father made sure he'd be hard to forget." The name landed like a physical blow. Blackwood, a name from a nightmare she had spent a decade outrunning. The feud between the Kanes and the Blackwoods was a legend of fire and blood, a story that had ended, or so she thought, with her father's death and the burning of their old home. She was supposed to be the last. The last Kane. Cyrus. Blackwood leaned forward in his saddle, his gaze dropping to the knife on her belt. His smile widened, a horrifying sight. "We heard you had that. The Kane family toothpick. My brother's blood is still on that blade, ain't it? Your father's parting gift to him." He straightened up, his voice dropping into a deadly quiet. "We're here to finish it. The Kane line ends tonight. We're here for your blood, girl. Every last drop." 7 against 1. The knife on her belt felt suddenly heavy, its purpose shifting in an instant from a memory of peace to a promise of violence. The knife she had never used for its true purpose was now the only thing standing between her and extinction. Alara's father killed Silas Blackwood with that very knife. Now the Blackwoods are here for revenge. But why did her father do it? What started the feud? And how can one woman with a single knife possibly survive against 7 hardened gunmen? The truth is loaded. Share your theories in the comments. Cyrus Blackwood's words hung in the air, a death sentence delivered with cold certainty. 7 pairs of eyes, hard and hungry for vengeance, were locked on Alara. Her hand itched to go for the knife, but she knew it would be a death sentence. Drawing it would be the spark that lit the powder keg. Instead, she forced her breathing to slow, her father's old lessons surfacing from the depths of her fear. A cornered animal fights blindly, Ilara. A warrior buys time. My father is dead, Ilara stated, her voice not pleading, but stating a fact. She needed to talk to understand the depth of their madness. The feud died with him. Whatever debt you believe was owed, it has been paid in full. Cyrus let out a short, barked laugh that held no humor. Paid? You think a quick death? Paid for what your family did? The Blackwoods don't forget a debt, girl, and we sure as hell don't let one go unpaid. Silas was my baby brother. Your old man didn't just kill him. He butchered him. Left him in the dust for the crows. That ain't a debt that gets paid with one life. It gets paid with a bloodline. He dismounted slowly, his movements deliberate and powerful. He took a step toward the porch, close enough that she could smell the stale tobacco and sweat on. He wasn't looking at her face. He was staring at the knife, his eyes gleaming with a possessive, almost lustful hatred. He stole from us, too, Cyrus snarled, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper meant only for her. That knife. That ain't just a knife. The bone in that handle. That's from the first stag killed when our families settled this territory together. A pact was made. A truce. The Canes and the Blackwoods were supposed to be brothers. Your grandfather and mine forged the blade together and swore on it. It was a symbol of shared land, shared fortune. He took another step, his boot creaking. On the bottom step of the porch, then your father got greedy. Wanted the water rights, the best grazing land for himself. He broke the pact. He used this very symbol of peace to murder my brother in cold blood, and then he stole it, like the thief he was. He finally tore his gaze from the knife, and looked into her eyes, his own burning with fanatical fire. That knife belongs to the Blackwoods. It represents everything your family stole from us, and your blood. Your blood is the final interest. On that debt, the history was a twisted, ugly thing, far more than a simple killing. It was a shattered oath, a perverted symbol, a theft that had festered in their minds for years. This wasn't just revenge. It was a crusade to reclaim their honor and erase the Cain name from the earth. Cyrus leaned back, a cruel satisfaction on his face as he saw the dawning horror in her eyes. He thought he had broken her. He gestured to his men. String her up. From that oak tree. Let the land see what happens to oath breakers. As two of the men moved forward, ropes in hand, Ilara's fear finally crystallized into something else, a cold, sharp clarity. They saw the knife as a trophy to be reclaimed. They saw her as a debt to be collected, but her father, on the day he gave her the knife and told her to run, had whispered something else. Something that had never made sense until this very second. The bone remembers. Ilara, when the time comes, the blood will show you the way. Her fingers didn't go to the hilt. Instead, they brushed against the ancient carved stag bone handle, and in that moment, she didn't see a symbol of a broken pact. She saw a map. The knife's handle is made from a stag bone that symbolizes a pact between the families. But Ilara's father said, the bone remembers, and the blood will show you the way. Is the carving actually a map? A map to what? Hidden treasure? The true story? What secret did her father leave her? The plot has twisted. Comment your guesses. Cyrus Blackwood's demand echoed in the small cabin, a sinister promise wrapped in a threat. You prove it. The knife felt alien in his hands, a hated object he now scrutinized for salvation. Ilara's mind raced. She had bought minutes, not hours. She needed to make the map real. Her eyes darted around the single room of her homestead. The fireplace, the table, the lantern. Her father's voice, a ghost from a safer time, whispered another fragment of memory. Secrets don't. Like the light, girl. But they love the shadows. It was a desperate gamble. A children's trick. A map like this isn't read under the open sky, Ilara said, her voice gaining a sliver of confidence. She reached for the lantern on the table. It needs a different kind of light. She turned down the wick, plunging the room into a deep, murky twilight, the only light coming from the dying embers in the hearth. Cyrus's hand went to his gun. "What are you playing at, girl?" "The truth," she replied, her heart hammering. She took the knife back from him, her fingers trembling only slightly. She hoped he would mistake it for awe, not terror. She positioned herself between the weak firelight and the largest blank wall of the cabin. Holding the intricately carved bone handle close to the wall, she angled it dotted first, nothing. Then, as she shifted it minutely, the deep grooves and patterns of the carving began to cast long, distorted shadows. They weren't just random lines anymore. They stretched and merged on the rough wood wall, forming a recognizable landscape. A high ridge here, a distinctive split rock formation there. A winding path that led to a series of 3 concentric circles, a symbol that could only be a mine shaft. A sharp intake of breath came from one of the Blackwood men. "I'll be damned. Look at that. It's the ridge north of Dead Man's Gulch." Ilara's own breath caught. It was a map. Her father's desperate clue hadn't been a metaphor. The bone truly did remember. It was a literal, physical guide. A shadow caster meant to be read in firelight. Cyrus stepped closer, his avaricious eyes wide, tracing the shadowy topography on the wall. He saw it too. The promise of wealth was now undeniable, a tangible image before him. His obsession with the knife now had a new, far more powerful layer. It wasn't just a symbol of vengeance. It was a key to a fortune. "The silver vein," he whispered, almost to himself. His finger, dirty and calloused, reached out and touched the wall where the 3 concentric circles glowed. "It's there, it's real." He turned to Ilara, his gaze no longer just murderous, but possessory. She was no longer just a debt. She was a tool. The only one who could read the map. "You know this land," he stated. "You've been sitting on top of it all this time." Ilara nodded slowly, lowering the knife. The shadows vanished, but the image was seared into all their minds. "I know the land," she confirmed. And she did. The map pointed to the most treacherous part of the territory, a place of unstable cliffs and old, forgotten diggings. A place called the Serpent's Coil. A cruel smile spread across Cyrus's face. "Then at first light, you're taking us there. You'll lead us right to it." He grabbed the knife from her again, clutching it to his chest. The balance of power had shifted perilously. She had convinced them, but in doing so, she had made herself indispensable until they had the silver. After that, her usefulness would be over. The night passed in a tense, silent vigil. Ilara sat in a chair, surrounded by her captors, each man lost in dreams of wealth. She looked at the knife in Cyrus's grip. She had seen the map. She knew the destination. But her father had been a man of layers, of secrets within secrets. A man who killed for a map to wealth would have dug it up himself. He hadn't. He had died protecting it. The map led to the silver. But Ilara now knew with cold certainty that her father had hidden something else there. Something he considered worth dying for. Something worth killing for. And she was leading the wolves right to its door. The map is real and leads to silver. But Ilara's father never retrieved it. WHY? What is he really protecting at that mine shaft? A trap? A deeper secret? Something more valuable than silver? The journey to the Serpent's Coil begins at dawn. What will they find? The mystery deepens. Comment your theories. Dawn broke, cold and grim, matching the mood of the procession that left Ilara's homestead. She was placed at the front, a solitary figure on her steady-mar, leading 7 armed and hungry wolves deeper into the wild heart of the territory. Cyrus Blackwood rode just behind her, the sheathed knife now tucked prominently in his own belt. a constant reminder of who held the power and the prize. The shadow map led them northeast, toward the jagged teeth of the mountains. The terrain grew increasingly hostile, the easy grasslands giving way to rocky gullies and precarious slopes. They were entering the Serpent's Coil, a place named for the treacherous, winding paths that could easily claim a life. Ilara knew these trails from her solitary explorations, a need to understand the land that was her prison and her refuge. Now that knowledge was her leash, Cyrus's initial greed had begun to curdle into impatience. "This looks like a path to nowhere, girl," he called out, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. "If you're leading us on a chase." "The map doesn't lie," Ilara replied, her voice calm though her insides were coiled tight. She pointed toward a distinctive rock formation that jutted from a cliff face like a broken tooth. "We follow the spine of the serpent until we see the eye. That rock is the first marker." She was reciting the story the shadows had told, weaving the puzzle pieces together. The men grumbled but followed, their eyes scanning the barren rocks for any glint of silver, any sign of a mine. The path narrowed, forcing them into a single file along a ledge with a dizzying drop. It was here that the first test came. One of the younger Blackwoods, a man with a nervous trigger finger named Jed, edged his skittish horse too close to the rim. The horse's hoof slipped on loose shale, sending a cascade of stones into the abyss. The animal reared in panic, its scream echoing through the canyon. Jed yelled, fighting for control, his weight shifting dangerously toward the drop dot in that split second. It would have been easy for Ilara to do nothing. One less Blackwood to worry about. But a death here would spook the others, could make them volatile, could end her fragile control of the situation. Acting on instinct, she wheeled, her horse around, its sturdy body blocking Yet's from bolting forward. "Easy," she commanded, her voice firm, not shouting, but cutting through the panic. She reached out and grabbed the bridle of Yet's horse, steadying it with a surprising strength. "Don't fight him. Let him feel your calm." The horse, sensing her steady hand, settled, its hooves finding purchase. Jed, pale and breathing heavily, nodded at her, a flicker of confused gratitude in his eyes, before he remembered she was the enemy. Cyrus watched the entire exchange, his expression unreadable. He said nothing, but the dynamic had shifted infinitesimally. Once more, she had saved one of his men. She was not just a guide. She was a competent presence in a dangerous land. It made her more useful. It also made her more dangerous in his eyes. They pressed on, the tension thicker than the dust. Finally, as the sun reached its zenith, they rounded a bend and Ilara reined in her horse. Before them was the place the shadows had promised, a sheer rock face, and at its base, the dark, yawning mouth of a mine shaft, its timber supports old and rotting. Above it, carved into the rock itself, were 3 concentric circles, exactly like in the shadow map. "There," Ilara said, her voice barely a whisper. A collective greed-filled sigh went through the Blackwoods. They saw their fortune. Cyrus dismounted, drawing his gun, his eyes fixed on the black entrance. But Ilara's eyes were not on the mine. They were on the ground at the entrance. It was littered with animal bones. Yes, but among them were newer things. A rusted but relatively recent tobacco tin, a few spent cartridge casings, and the footprints leading into the darkness. They were too fresh to be her father's. Someone else had been here. Recently, they found the mine. But someone else he has been here. Who? Rival claim jumpers? Someone else who knows the secret of the knife? Or is it something far more sinister waiting for them in the dark? The treasure is within reach, but so is a new danger. What's in the mine? Comment your predictions. The 2 Blackwood men were on the porch steps, their shadows long and menacing in the fading light. Rough hands reached for her. Time seemed to warp, stretching thin. Her father's cryptic words echoed in her mind, a desperate prayer. The bone remembers, The blood will show you the way. It was madness. A final dying hope, but it was all she had. Wait. Ilara's voice rang out, sharper and louder than she intended, freezing the men in their tracks. Even Cyrus looked momentarily, surprised by the authority in her tone. She didn't reach for the knife to fight. Instead, with deliberate, slow movements, she unbuckled the sheath from her belt, holding the sheathed knife out in her open palms. It was a gesture of surrender, but her eyes blazed with a defiant fire. "You want your trophy?" she said, her voice steady, though her heart felt like it would beat its way out of her chest. She looked directly at Cyrus. "Then take it. But you're a fool if you think this is just a knife." Cyrus's eyes narrowed, suspicious of the sudden shift. He waved his men back, taking the step up onto the porch himself. He loomed over her, but she held her ground. "It's a key," Ilara stated, the idea forming fully even as she spoke the words, trusting the instinct her father had buried in her. She turned the knife in her hands, pointing to the intricate, swirling carvings on the bone handle. In the dim light, they had always looked like mere decoration. But now, seen through the lens of a desperate secret, they looked like something else entirely. Lines converged, swirled into circular depressions, ran in deliberate paths. "My father didn't just steal a symbol from you," she lied, weaving truth and fiction into a desperate gamble. "He stole your legacy, your future." The pact wasn't just about sharing land. It was about what you found on it. She tapped the handle. "This isn't carving. It's a map. A map to the Mother Lode's silver vein your grandfather and mine discovered together. The vein that started the feud." Cyrus's face went through a series of transformations, from skepticism to dawning curiosity to outright avaricious hunger. The promise of wealth, of a tangible prize beyond mere vengeance, was a language he understood far better than honor. "You're lying," he growled, but his eyes were glued to the bone handle, searching the patterns for the truth she was selling. I? Ilara challenged, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Why else would my father kill for it? Why would he tell me it was more valuable than our lives? Why would I still be here, guarding this worthless piece of land, if not for what lies beneath it?" She thrust the knife toward him. "Go on, take it. See if you can read it. My father could. Can you?" It was the perfect dare. To admit he couldn't would be to admit inferiority to the man he hated. Cyrus Blackwood snatched the sheathed knife from her hands, his fingers tracing the carvings with a new, frantic intensity. His men watched, their bloodlust momentarily forgotten, replaced by the glitter of gold in their eyes. Ilara held her breath. She had taken their single-minded purpose, revenge, and split it in two. Now it was revenge versus greed. She had planted a seed of doubt, of desire. She had bought herself time, but Cyrus was no fool. He looked up from the knife, his eyes narrowing into slits. "All right, Kane," he said, a new, dangerous tone in his voice. "You want to live through the night? You prove it. You read this map. You take us to this silver. And if you're lying..." He didn't need to finish the threat. The promise of a slower, more creative death hung in the air. He had just accepted her deal. And in doing so, he had handed the weapon back to her. The weapon was not the knife. It was her knowledge. She was now the guide. And she alone knew that the map, if it was even real, led to something far more dangerous than silver. Ilara's bluff worked. But now she has to lead 7 vengeful gunmen on a treasure hunt using a map she doesn't understand. What will she find when she reads the bone? Is there really silver, or did her father hide something else? The danger is greater than ever. What's the next move? Comment your predictions. The sight of the fresh tracks in the dirt before the mine shaft was a bucket of cold water on the Blackwood's greed. The promise of silver was suddenly overshadowed by the threat of an ambush. Guns were drawn in a chorus of clicks and shuffles. the men fanning out, using what little cover the rocky outcrop provided. Cyrus Blackwood shoved Ilara behind a large boulder, his grip rough. "You set us up," he hissed, his eyes blazing with paranoid fury. "No," Ilara shot back, her voice low and urgent. "If I had allies, do you think I'd be here with you? Those tracks aren't mine. Someone else knows about this place." The logic pierced his anger. He peered around the boulder, studying the entrance. The footprints were a mess, but they led in, not out. Whoever was inside was likely still in there. The tobacco tin and shell casings suggested they were well armed and had been waiting for some time. Rivals, one of the other Blackwoods, a grizzled man named Harlan, spat. The Cooper gang heard they'd been sniffing around these parts. They must have caught wind. Cyrus's face twisted. The Coopers were a vicious bunch, known for jumping claims and leaving no witnesses. A direct assault into the dark, narrow confines of the mine shaft would be a slaughter. They'd be picked off one by one. "We can smoke 'em out," another man suggested, already gathering dry brush. "And collapse the entrance? Bury the silver with them?" "You idiot," Cyrus snarled, silencing him. He was trapped, his prize so close yet guarded by a phantom enemy. Ilara watched the conflict on his face. The reckless bloodlust versus the avaricious need to possess the silver. This was her chance. The chaos was a weapon. "There's another way." "In," she said quietly. All eyes turned to her. Cyrus's were narrow slits. "What?" "When my father found this place, he was wary. He never trusted a single entrance." She pointed away from the main shaft, toward a scree-covered slope about 50 yards away, nearly invisible behind a thicket of thorny brush. "There's a secondary entrance, a crawl space he found. It's tight, but it comes out behind a blind spot in the main tunnel. He showed me once. It was a lie, but a plausible one, built on the truth of her father's cautious nature." Cyrus studied her, looking for the trap. "Why tell us this now?" "Because you'll get yourselves killed going in the front way," she said, meeting his gaze without flinching. "And if you die, I die out here alone, or I get taken by whoever is in there. My best chance is with you getting that silver." It was the perfect thing to say. It was selfish. It was survival. He understood that language. After a tense moment, he nodded. "Harlan Jed with me. The rest of you surround the main entrance. If anyone but us comes out, shoot them. Girl, you're leading the way." The four of them, Cyrus, his two men, and Ilara, moved quietly to the slope. After minutes of clearing sharp brush, they found it. A narrow vertical fissure in the rock, just wide enough for a person to squeeze through. It exhaled a breath of cold, damp air. "You first," Cyrus ordered, shoving Ilara toward the opening. Taking a deep breath, she entered the darkness. The rock was tight and cold against her back. She inched forward, the world reduced to the sound of her own breathing and the scuff of boots behind her. The tunnel sloped downward, then opened up slightly. A faint light glowed ahead. And with it, voices, muffled, echoing. Double quotes. Check again. "They should have been here by now," a rough voice said. "Relax, Blackwood's a brute, but he's greedy. He'll come. The Kane girl will lead him right to us." Ilara froze, her blood running cold. They knew her name. They knew about the Blackwoods. They weren't rivals. They were waiting for them. She held up a hand, stopping the men behind her. They crowded close, listening. The first voice chuckled. "The boss will pay a fortune for this. Not for the silver. For the knife, and for ending the whole damn bloodline in one go." Cyrus's breath hitched behind her. His hand clamped on her shoulder, not in anger, but in a shared, dawning horror. They weren't here for the silver. They were here for the same reason the Blackwoods were. But someone else was paying them. There's a third party involved. A boss has hired these men to ambush both the Blackwoods and Ilara. Who is this mysterious mastermind? Someone from the family's past? A rival tycoon? And why do they want the knife so badly? The conspiracy is much bigger than anyone knew. Who's pulling the strings? Comment your theories. The words from the unseen men echoed in the cramped tunnel, rewriting the entire history of the feud in an instant. The boss will pay a fortune ... for the knife. For ending the whole damn bloodline. This wasn't just a battle between two families. It was a slaughterhouse, and a third hidden hand was guiding them all to the knife. Cyrus's grip on Alara's shoulder tightened, his fingers like iron. The sheer, incandescent rage she felt radiating from him was a palpable heat in the cold. Passage. His vendetta, the core of his being for over a decade, had just been revealed as a puppet show. He wasn't the master of vengeance. He was a pawn in someone else's game. He leaned close, his whisper a venomous scrape in her ear. Who? The single word was loaded with the promise of a violence that would now be redirected. Alara could only shake her head, her mind reeling. Who stood to gain from the complete annihilation of both families? Who knew the secret of the knives? True value? The voices in the main chamber continued, unaware of the audience in the walls. Just wish we could have grabbed the girl at the homestead. Cleaner, one man grumbled. And miss this? Another chuckled. Let the Blackwoods do the dirty work of getting the map from her. Then we take it from them. Boss gets what he wants, and we get paid double for wiping out two problems at once. Now shut up and listen. They should be here. The plan was chilling in its efficiency. The Blackwoods were the unwitting key, used to unlock the map from its keeper before being disposed of. Alara was the prize to be eliminated last. Cyrus slowly released her shoulder. The simple, brutal arithmetic of the situation was clear to them all. 7 Blackwoods outside, an unknown number of hired guns inside. Their common enemy was no longer each other. He motioned for Harlan and Jed to retreat back up the narrow tunnel. Once they had put some distance between them and the fissure, he spoke in the lowest possible whisper. They're waiting for my boys to rush the front door. They'll be cut down. His mind was working, the brute transforming into a cornered strategist. We have the one thing they don't. We know they're here. He looked at Alara, a new grim respect in his eyes. You got us in here. Can you get us behind them? Alara's heart pounded. She pictured the shadow map, the layout of the tunnels as her father's firelight had revealed them. The secondary entrance was supposed to come out behind a blind spot. She nodded slowly. I think so. The tunnel should curve around, but it'll be tight. And we'll be trapped between them and your men outside. A vicious smile spread across Cyrus's face. It was the first real expression she'd seen on him that wasn't hatred. It was the joy of a predator turning the tables. No, we won't. We're the anvil. My men are the hammer. He detailed the plan with quick, brutal efficiency. Harlan, the quietest of them, was to crawl back out and circle around to the main Blackwood group. He was to tell them to hold position. On Cyrus's signal, 3 shots fired in rapid succession from inside the mine. They were to storm the front entrance, guns blazing. We'll be behind the ambush, Cyrus whispered, his eyes gleaming in the dark. We hit them from behind, while they're focused on the front. We squashed them in the middle. It was a good plan, a deadly plan. It relied on perfect timing and the Blackwoods' ruthless efficiency in a fight. Alara looked from Cyrus to Jed, seeing the same bloodlust. Ignited by this new betrayal, they were no longer her captors. They were her temporary, terrifying allies. Harlan slipped away like a ghost. The wait that followed was an eternity, measured in the drip of water and the beat of her own heart. Finally, Cyrus gave a sharp nod. It was time. They crept forward, the tunnel gradually widening. The glow of lantern light grew brighter, and the murmur of voices became distinct. Peering around a final bend, they saw them. 4 men, lounging against crates near the main tunnel entrance. Their rifles pointed toward the light of the outside world. their backs completely exposed to the dark secondary passage. Cyrus raised his pistol. Jed did the same. Ilara, unarmed, pressed herself against the cold rock wall. Cyrus took a deep breath and fired. Bang. Bang. The signal shots were deafening in the confined space. The 4 hired guns spun around, shock and confusion on their faces. They were perfectly silhouetted against the mine entrance, and then all hell broke loose. From outside, a volley of gunfire erupted as the Blackwoods stormed the entrance. From inside, Cyrus and Jed opened fire from point-blank range. The ambush had become a trap. The hunters had become the prey. The trap is sprung. The Blackwoods and Ilara are fighting side by side against the mysterious boss's men. But in the chaos of the gunfight, who will get to the truth first? What will they find on the bodies of these hired guns that reveals the identity of the boss? The final secret is about to be uncovered. Comment your predictions. The mine shaft became a bowl of echoing thunder and blinding flashes. The 4 hired guns, caught in a vicious crossfire, stood no chance. They were cut down in seconds, their bodies slumping against the crates they'd used for cover. The gunshots from the entrance ceased as the Blackwood men outside, realizing the fight inside was over, cautiously advanced into the tunnel. Smoke hung thick in the air, acrid and suffocating. The sudden silence that followed was more deafening than the gunfire. Cyrus Blackwood stood panting, his pistol smoking, his eyes wild with the adrenaline of the fight and the fury of betrayal. He had gotten his vengeance, but it was against the wrong enemy. He holstered his gun and strode toward the nearest corpse, rolling the man over with a rough boot. Search them. He barked at his men. Pockets, papers, anything. I want a name. The Blackwoods descended on the bodies like carrion birds, rifling through coats and pants. Ilara stayed back, her heart hammering, the smell of blood and gunpowder making her stomach turn. She watched, a silent witness to the gruesome. Search. Jed found it first. Cyrus, over here. He was kneeling beside the man who had been doing most of the talking. In the man's inside coat pocket, he hadn't found a name. He'd found something better, a leather wallet. And tucked inside, not money, but a neatly folded piece of expensive linen paper. Jed unfolded it and held it up to the lantern light. It was a bank draft, a promise of payment for services rendered. The amount was staggering, enough to buy a dozen ranches. But it was the name at the bottom, the name of the account authorizing the payment, that made the blood drain from Cyrus's face. It wasn't a name Ilara recognized. J.D. Vandermeer. Cyrus read aloud, his voice a hollow, disbelieving whisper. He stumbled back as if struck, the paper trembling in his hand. No, it can't be. Ilara saw the shock, the raw, personal betrayal that eclipsed even his hatred for her family. Who is that? She asked, her voice small in the vast silence. Cyrus looked at her, his eyes wide with a horror that was entirely new. Jonas Theodore Vandermeer, he said the name. Tasting like ash. He was my father's lawyer, his most trusted advisor. He handled everything after my father's death. He's the one who helped me fund this whole damn expedition. He crushed the paper in his fist. He knew about the knife. He knew about the feud. He encouraged it. He loaned me the money for supplies, for men. The pieces slammed together with brutal force. Vandermeer hadn't just known about the feud. He had been fueling it from the shadows. He had used Cyrus's grief and thirst for vengeance as a tool, bankrolling him to hunt down the last Cain and retrieve the knife, all while setting a second team to clean up the mess to wipe out both families once the artifact was secured. But why? Ilara asked, the question echoing everyone's thoughts. What does a lawyer want with a decades-old feud and a bone-handled knife? Cyrus's gaze fell to the knife still tucked in his belt. He pulled it out, staring at it not with hatred now, but with a dawning, terrifying reverence. It's Not about the silver, he murmured, his father's stories clicking into a new, dark configuration. It was never about the silver. My father, he never shut up about the pact, about the knife. He said it was the key to the family's true legacy. I thought he meant the land, the wealth. He looked up, his eyes meeting Alara's. What if he meant something else? What if Vandermeer knows what that is? The mysterious boss had a name. And he wasn't a rival. He was the puppet master who had been pulling their strings for years, waiting for them to lead him to a prize he believed was far greater than silver. And now he knew they were here. His men were dead. He would know his plan had failed. He would be coming himself. The mastermind is Cyrus's own family lawyer, Vandermeer. He's been manipulating both families for years. But what is the knife's true legacy that he wants so badly? What secret is so powerful it's worth destroying two families? The final secret of the bone knife is about to be revealed. What is it? Comment your wildest theories. The name Vandermeer hung in the cavernous silence like a poison gas. The hired gun's bodies were a stark testament to the lawyer's ruthlessness. He wasn't just a manipulator. He was an exterminator, and he had just lost his first team. He'll come himself now, Cyrus said, his voice grim. The crushed bank draft fell from his hand. He's too close to his prize to risk another failure. We have minutes, maybe less. The focus was no longer on the silver vein, the original source of the feud. That was a diversion, a red herring that had consumed their fathers. The real treasure was whatever the knife truly unlocked, and they needed to find it before Vandermeer arrived with more men. The map, Ilara said, urgency sharpening her tone. The shadow map didn't just lead to the mine. It led to a specific point inside the mine. Cyrus didn't hesitate. He thrust the knife toward her. Show us. They moved deeper into the tunnel, leaving the dead behind. The air grew colder, the only sound the drip of water and their own hurried footsteps. Alara held the knife, its bone handle cold in her palm. She used the lantern one of the Blackwoods carried, holding the knife up to cast its shadow on the rough rock walls. She was looking for a match, for the final destination the shadow map had pointed to. It should be here, she muttered, frustration mounting. The shadow showed a convergence of lines, a specific marking. But the tunnel walls were just walls. Jed, the young Blackwood she had saved on the trail, spoke up, his voice tentative. Ma'am, the shadow on the floor. Ilara looked down. The lantern light, combined with the knife's intricate patterns, was casting a complex shadow on the dusty ground. And there, etched into the very rock of the tunnel floor, was a faint, almost imperceptible pattern. It was a perfect match for the central symbol on the knife's handle, the 3 concentric circles. It's not on the wall, Ilara breathed. It's under us. They dropped to their knees, brushing away decades of dust and debris. The symbol was carved into a single, large, flat stone that seemed different from the surrounding rock. It wasn't part of the natural floor. It was a seal. Here, the edge, Harlan called out, finding a narrow gap. They dug their fingers in, heaving with all their might. The stone was immense, but desperation gave them strength. With a grating groan that echoed through the tunnels, the stone slab pivoted upward, revealing a dark, narrow space beneath a hidden alcove forgotten by time. Cyrus snatched the lantern and thrust it into the opening. The light glinted off something metal. A small, rusted strongbox, banded in iron. There were no jewels, no piles of gold. Just a single, unassuming box. This was it. The true legacy. Cyrus hauled it out, setting it on the ground with a heavy thud. The lock was rusted shut. Without a word, he took the knife from Alara. Not the sheathed blade, but the knife itself. He inserted the tip of the blade into the old lock, and with a precise twist, the mechanism, designed to accept this key and no other, snapped open. Lid creaked as he lifted it. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, were not ingots or coins. There was a single yellowed parchment deed, and beneath it, a smaller folded piece of paper. Cyrus picked up the deed first. His eyes scanned the elegant, old-fashioned script. His face, usually a mask of anger, went slack with utter astonishment. "It's not a deed to land," he stammered, his voice filled with awe. "It's a deed of merger, a partnership. The Kane and Blackwood families didn't just find silver, they found a gold vein. A mother lode that makes the silver look like pocket. Change this deed. It dissolves the original pact and merges their assets into a single shared company. 50-50, signed by both grandfathers. The feud was based on a lie, a colossal, catastrophic lie. There was no theft. There was only a partnership that someone had destroyed." Trembling, Cyrus picked up the smaller paper. It was a letter, written in a frantic, familiar script. Ilara recognized her father's handwriting immediately. "If you are reading this, then the worst has come to pass. Cyrus Blackwood is dead by my hand. I did not want to do it. He came at me, in a rage, accusing me of stealing the gold, of altering the deed. He would not listen. He had a lawyer, a snake named Vandermeer, whispering in his ear, twisting everything. I believe it was Vandermeer who altered the documents, who poisoned Silas's mind against me to get control of the combined fortune for himself. I have hidden the true deed here. The knife is the key. Protect it. He will come for it. He will come for you. I am so sorry, my Ilara. I have saved our legacy, but I have doomed us all." The truth was a thunderclap. Vandermeer. He hadn't just fueled the feud. He had created it. He had turned brother against brother, manipulated them into killing each other, all to get his hands on a fortune so vast it made men into monsters. The blast of a gunshot echoed from the mine entrance, followed by shouts. Then, a voice, smooth as oil and cold as ice, called out, ringing through the tunnels. "Cyrus, Ilara, I believe you have something that belongs to me." Vandermeer had arrived. And he wasn't alone. The feud was a lie manufactured by the lawyer Vandermeer to steal a massive gold fortune. He's here now, and he has them cornered in the mine. How can they possibly escape and expose him? The final showdown is here. What is their last desperate move? Predict the epic finale. Vandermeer's voice was a slick poison flooding the tunnel, freezing them all in place. He was here, the architect of their misery, standing between them and the outside world. Cyrus's face contorted, a raw snarl of betrayal tearing from his throat. He went for his gun. "I wouldn't." Vandermeer's voice chimed again, closer now. A figure stepped into the lantern light at the end of the tunnel. He was impeccably dressed in a city suit, looking utterly out of place in the dusty mine. He held a revolver, not with the practiced grip of a gunman, but with the cold certainty of a man who paid others to get his hands dirty. Behind him, the shadows of more men shifted. "The first bullet is for the girl, Cyrus, then for you. I'd rather have the deed and the knife intact, but I will leave with them one way or another." Cyrus's hand hovered over his pistol, his entire body trembling with the effort of restraint. Ilura's mind raced. They were cornered. Vandermeer held all the power. He had the exit, the numbers, and the ruthlessness. Her eyes fell on the strongbox at Cyrus's feet. The true deed. The proof. It was worth more than any of their lives to Vandermeer. It was the only leverage they had got in a movement faster than thought. Ilara dove for the box. She didn't go for the deed. She snatched the knife from where Cyrus had dropped it beside the strongbox. "Ilara, no!" Cyrus hissed, thinking she meant to attack. Vandermeer's gun twitched toward her. Foolish girl. But Ilara didn't lunge at him. Instead, she raised the ancient, bone-handled knife high above her head and threw it with all her strength. Not at Vandermeer. She threw it at the rusted iron lantern hook embedded in a rotten support beam directly above the lawyer's head. The impact was jarring. The knife struck true, clanging against the metal hook, and a shower of sparks and dust rained down on Vandermeer. He flinched, instinctively throwing up his arms. His perfect shot ruined. That single second of distraction was all Cyrus Blackwood needed. He drew and fired in one fluid motion. The bullet took Vandermeer high in the shoulder, spinning him around. With a cry of shock and pain, the lawyer's gun clattered to the stone floor. Chaos erupted. Vandermeer's men, caught off guard by their boss being hit, opened fire blindly into the tunnel. The Blackwoods returned fire, the confined space exploding. With deafening noise, Cyrus didn't join the fight. He lunged forward, not for a gun, but for the true deed. He snatched it from the strongbox, holding the fragile parchment aloft like a torch. The feud is a lie. He roared, his voice booming over the gunfire. Vandermeer's work, the gold, is ours, all of ours. See for yourselves. He thrust the deed toward Vandermeer's own men. The shooting stuttered, then ceased. Confusion reigned. These were hired guns, loyal only to money. The promise of a vast shared fortune was a more powerful weapon than any threat. In the sudden silence, the truth did the fighting for them. Vandermeer, clutching his bleeding shoulder, saw his men hesitating, their guns lowering. He saw the deed in Cyrus's hand. He saw it was over. His perfect plan unraveled by a thrown knife and a piece of paper. He collapsed against the wall, not from the wound, but from defeat. The aftermath was a blur. Vandermeer was disarmed and tied up. His men offered a share of the gold to switch. Allegiances accepted without a second thought. Weeks later, the new Kane-Blackwood partnership was the talk of the territory. The combined fortune built a new town, a shared future on the ashes of the old hatred. Ilara stood on the porch of her rebuilt homestead, the sound of construction on the wind. Cyrus Blackwood walked up, holding the bone-handled knife. He offered it to her, handle first. "It belongs to you," he said, his voice rough but without malice. A symbol of a pact. A real one this time. Ilara took it. She looked at the carved stag bone, no longer a map to a secret, but a reminder of one. She slid it into her belt. She had lived with a knife she never used, until the day she used it not to kill, but to save. And in doing so, she had not ended a bloodline. She had redeemed one.